Lilo and Stitch. Disney's Lilo and Stitch. In a far-off galaxy, an alien scientist named Jumba had created a strange creature called Experiment 626. Because 626 was always destroying things, he was being sent to prison by the Grand Councilwoman. But 626 managed to escape. Now, 626 was headed for Earth. The Grand Councilwoman sent Jumba and Pleakley, another alien, on a mission to capture 626 and bring him back. Meanwhile, on Earth, a 5-year-old Hawaiian girl named Lilo was also on a mission. She was feeding a peanut butter sandwich to a fish named Pudge. Lilo thought it was very important to do this because she believed Pudge controlled the weather. Unfortunately, Lilo was now late for her hula dance class. Lilo rushed into her dance class, dripping water on the floor. Her classmates began to slip and slide. "Stop, stop!" cried the hula instructor. He asked Lilo why she was late and wet. The little girl tried to explain about Pudge. "You're crazy," said Myrtle, one of Lilo's classmates. Lilo pounced on Myrtle. The instructor quickly pulled them apart. The instructor called Lilo's sister, Nani, to take Lilo home. Nani was Lilo's only family. But when Nani arrived, Lilo had already left. Nani panicked because a social worker was arriving this afternoon to decide whether Lilo could continue to live with Nani. But Lilo was already at home listening to Elvis Presley music. She was sad because none of her classmates wanted to be her friend. Lilo was so upset she locked her sister out of the house. Nani was still trying to get in when the social worker, Cobra Bubbles, arrived. Once inside, the visit went from bad to worse. Cobra told Nani that she had 3 days to prove that she could take care of Lilo properly. Otherwise, Lilo would be taken away. Later that evening, Nani and Lilo were talking in Lilo's room. Suddenly, something lit up the sky outside. "A falling star!" Lilo shouted excitedly. She pushed Nani out of her room. Lilo wanted to make a wish in private. But Nani still listened as Lilo whispered, "It's me again. I need someone to be my friend. Maybe send me an angel, the nicest angel you have." But what Lilo had really seen was 626's spaceship crashing into Earth. 626 stepped out of the smoking crater. He cackled with delight. He headed down a dark road, only to be run over by some trucks and knocked out. When he woke up the next morning, none the worse for wear, the indestructible 626 found he was in an animal rescue home. Before long, he realized that Jumba and Pleakley were after him. That same morning, Nani and Lilo went to the animal rescue home to find a pet. Nani hoped it would cheer Lilo up. When Lilo came in, 626 tried to look as much like a dog as he could. Lilo was his only way to escape from Jumba and Pleakley. So, he hugged Lilo and won her heart. "What is that thing?" Nani cried when she saw 626. "A dog, I think," the rescue lady answered nervously. Despite Nani's protests, Lilo adopted her new dog and named him Stitch. Meanwhile, Jumba and Pleakley were watching as Nani and Lilo left with Stitch. Jumba wanted to capture 626 right away, but Pleakley reminded his partner that they could not be seen. "We have to blend in," Pleakley told him. After Nani left for work, Lilo tried to teach Stitch to fetch, but Stitch was not interested in being trained. Lilo ended up fetching for Stitch instead. Then Lilo bought 2 snow cones. Stitch ended up dumping his on the head of a small dog. Stitch was not exactly what Lilo had expected. Dressed like tourists, Jumba and Pleakley were nearby watching Stitch. They were waiting for their chance to capture him. Later that day, Lilo and Stitch sat at the restaurant where Nani worked. Lilo finished drawing in her sketchbook and held it up to Stitch. "This is you," she told him. "This is your badness level. It's unusually high for someone your size. We need to fix that." Jumba and Pleakley were also sitting in the restaurant. They lured Stitch over to their table. While Jumba grabbed Stitch and tried to place his alien handcuffs on the creature, Stitch opened his mouth wide and swallowed Pleakley's head. Nani had to dump a pitcher of iced tea on Stitch to make him let go. When the restaurant owner found out that Stitch belonged to Nani, he pointed to the door. "This is not working out," he told Nani. Nani and Lilo took Stitch home. "This is a great home. You'll like it a lot," Lilo told Stitch. She gave him a pillow so he could sleep on the floor. Stitch shredded the pillow. Then he went to the kitchen, where he made another mess. Nani had had enough. She grabbed Stitch, saying, "We have to take him back." "He was an orphan and we adopted him," said Lilo. "What about Ohana?" Nani stopped. Their father had taught them about Ohana. "Ohana means family," Lilo continued. "Family means nobody gets left behind or forgotten. I know," Nani said, sighing. Stitch jumped from Nani's arms, and he and Lilo went into Lilo's room. Stitch climbed onto Lilo's bed and found a photograph of her family under the pillow. "Be careful with that," Lilo warned. The picture was all she had left of her father and mother. She snatched it back and slipped the precious photo back underneath her pillow. So Stitch amused himself with other things in Lilo's room. He built a model city, and then destroyed it. In the middle of the night, Stitch woke Lilo and showed her a picture in a book he had found. "That's the ugly duckling," Lilo yawned. "See? He's sad because he is all alone and nobody wants him." Lilo pointed to another page. "And on this page his family hears him crying, and they find him. He is happy because he knows where he belongs." Stitch took the book and crawled into the bed Lilo had made for him. The next morning Cobra Bubbles paid them a visit. "Heard you lost your job," he said to Nani. But before Nani could explain, Stitch whacked Cobra with a book. As he left, Cobra told Nani that she had to get a new job if she expected to keep Lilo. To Lilo he said, "The next time I see this dog, I expect it to be a model citizen." So Nani set out to find a new job, with Lilo and Stitch in tow. First, she went to the local grocery store, where Nani spoke to the owner. Lilo tried to teach Stitch to behave. "Elvis Presley was a model citizen," Lilo explained. "I've compiled a list of his traits for you to practice. Number 1 is dancing." Unfortunately, their dance routine knocked over the owner, so Nani didn't get that job. While Nani tried to get a job at a coffee shop, Lilo continued with Stitch's lessons. "Number 2, Elvis played guitar," she said as she handed Stitch a ukulele. But when Stitch played the instrument, the piercing high notes shattered glass. Nani didn't get that job either. Finally, as Nani tried to get a job as a lifeguard, Lilo prepared Stitch for his last lesson. "Time to bring it all together," she told him. Stitch began to play his ukulele. Tourists began to crowd around him to take pictures, but their camera flashes upset Stitch, who caused a commotion. Nani, once again, did not get the job. Everything had gone wrong. The unhappy sisters sat down on the beach. David, a friend of Nani's, saw them. To cheer them up, David suggested they all go surfing. The group headed for the waves. Once she began to surf, Nani forgot all her troubles. Stitch clapped his paws, and David and Lilo laughed as they enjoyed the waves. For a little while, everyone was happy. But as Nani, Lilo, and Stitch rode a large wave, Jumba sneaked up behind them. Jumba grabbed Stitch and pulled him under the water. Desperate, Stitch grabbed Lilo and began dragging her down. David and Nani pulled Lilo to safety, never noticing the aliens. Stitch finally won his struggle with Pleakley and Jumba, but he was exhausted. Luckily, David went back and rescued Stitch. Back on the beach, Nani frantically checked to make sure Lilo was okay. Nani looked up to see Cobra Bubbles watching. He had seen the whole thing. Nani asked David to watch Lilo. Then Cobra quietly told Nani that although he knew she was trying, it was time to find a more suitable home for Lilo. That night, Lilo studied her family photo. Our family's little now, but if you want, you could be part of it, she said to Stitch. Stitch wanted to belong, but he knew he had already caused too much trouble. While Lilo watched, Stitch took the Ugly Duckling book and climbed out of the window and into the night. Stitch walked into the forest. He opened the storybook to the pages that Lilo had shown him. Just like the Ugly Duckling, Stitch felt alone. "I'm lost!" he cried. The next morning, a very unhappy Grand Councilwoman fired Pleakley and Jumba. But Jumba was pleased. Now he could capture Stitch his way. Soon Jumba found Stitch in the forest. Stitch didn't run, but he wouldn't go with Jumba either. "Waiting," Stitch told Jumba. "For what?" Jumba asked impatiently. "Family," replied Stitch. "You're built to destroy. You can never belong," Jumba said. Stitch dropped the book and ran. Meanwhile, Lilo joins Nani in the kitchen for breakfast. Stitch left, Lilo murmured sadly. Nani comforted Lilo. Now it would be harder to tell Lilo that they would be living apart. But suddenly, David burst in saying, "I think I found you a job." This was Nani's last chance to keep Lilo. She rushed out with David, telling Lilo to stay inside and not to let anyone in. At the same time, Stitch was racing to Lilo's house with Jumba following close behind. Stitch slipped through the dog door. Jumba crashed through the front door. Frightened, Lilo called Cobra Bubbles. "Aliens are attacking my house! They want my dog!" Jumba and Stitch fought so hard that they destroyed the house. Meanwhile, Nani got the job at the general store down the street. As she left, a fire engine shrieked past. Fearing the worst, Nani raced home. Cobra Bubbles was already there. Lilo was in his car. Nani begged Cobra not to take Lilo from her. Cobra just pointed to the ruined house and shook his head. Lilo watched as the two argued. Then she slipped out of the car and ran into the forest. Stitch followed her. Stitch quickly found Lilo. Wanting to apologize, he handed Lilo her scorched family photo, which he had managed to save. But Lilo was angry at Stitch. "You ruined everything!" she shouted. Lost for words, Stitch transformed himself into his alien form. Lilo finally understood. "You're one of them." At that moment, an alien named Captain Gantu appeared. He had been sent by the Grand Councilwoman to capture Stitch. He snared both Stitch and Lilo and carried them to his spaceship. Stitch escaped, but before he could free Lilo, Gantu's ship took off. By the time Nani arrived, she was too late. She watched as the spaceship carrying her sister disappeared into the sky. Luckily, Stitch convinced Jumba and Pleakley to help him rescue Lilo. Soon, Nani and the three aliens were in Jumba's spaceship battling Captain Gantu. After a wild chase, Stitch was able to free Lilo. Jumba landed his spaceship on the waves behind David, who was surfing. David gave them all a ride to shore on his surfboard, though it took a few trips. But their troubles were not over. Cobra Bubbles was waiting on the beach for Lilo, and alien troops were waiting for Stitch. The Grand Councilwoman ordered the troops to place Stitch on her ship. Stitch asked if he could say goodbye to Lilo. The Councilwoman was shocked. "This is my family," Stitch explained. "I found it all on my own. It's little and broken, but it's still good." Then Lilo showed Stitch's adoption papers to the Grand Councilwoman. A stickler for rules, she agreed to let Stitch stay on Earth with Lilo, and Cobra decided Lilo could stay with Nani. Jumba and Pleakley stayed on Earth too. Along with David and Cobra Bubbles, they became part of Lilo's new family, where no one ever gets left behind.